Welcome back to another video. We're going to be doing fork seals on the front of the ST1300. And I need a refill. Okay, the parts you will need. I have 2 liters of fork oil and my seals inner and outer. Make sure you've got the Haynes manual. Alright, let's remove the front wheel and the brake calipers. Undo all the bolts for the fork tubes after you've removed the wheel and the calipers. So now I'm going to be taking off the cap of one of my fork tubes. What I want to do first, make sure I'm going the right direction. I'm going to start by spinning this until it gets easy for me, and then I can actually almost see the seal for the fork tube cap. I want to stop there. I'm going to grab some gloves and a rag. Luckily I have a bike holder for a vice grip. Do this because this is spring loaded. So you need to be careful about loosening your cap before you take it all the way off, because if you're not prepared for it, you could hurt yourself. There we go. Perfect. After you've done that, what you want to do is get your tool back on the cap, and I've got a 14mm wrench on here right now on the top nut right underneath so that you can crank it loose and take off the cap itself. These threads are really fine. Make sure that you clean them and the cap before going back in. Going to flip the fork tube upside down, let it drain for a little bit. What you're going to see come out of the fork is a cylinder, the spring itself, and a washer. I need to be conscientious because it's a progressive spring, which way it came out and what way it goes back in. After you have drained your fork, what you need to do is remove the top dust cap. I used a Phillips flathead and very gently, there's a notch right there, started wiggling my way up and all the way around, because underneath there is a locking ring that you need to get in and remove, and then you can remove the inner seal. Now underneath the fork is an Allen bolt inside the bottom of the fork that holds the dampening cartridge together. What you want to do is pull that bolt out. There will be additional fork fluid that comes out of there. This was tight, so you will need something to pry it off. And then you'll be able to pull the entirety of the cartridge out of the fork. Alright, for the camera, let's see if I can knock this bitch out with just a flat head. There's grooves in the ring, so that when you do get it, you can just pop around it. Yes! There's the snap ring you need to remove and keep. Because after that, now you can just ram this bitch out real good. I have removed the entirety of my fork tube. My seal, a washer for setting, and the bearing it sits on. Now I'm not going to fully rebuild this fork tube. I'm just replacing the seals. Reinstalling your new seal. Haynes manual says to use a chisel and a hammer. That's kind of uncomfortable on the new seal. Some people will get radiator tube, cut it, and put 2 clamp bands around it, and then use the tube itself to slam it into place. What I like to do is actually use the old seal. After you've put the new seal in, I try to dig it down as much as I can by hand and then compress it with the new seal, or the old seal. Now that the old seal is on top of the new seal, I can use whatever I want. I would prefer to have some kind of hammering tool that's cylindrical that I can slide over the fork tube. That's the perfect diameter to slam it into place. But a lot of people won't have that tool. So I'm going to use the old seal and beat the shit out of it to put the new seal in so that I don't damage the new seal. Hammer and I actually used a pair of pliers with a rounded end on it. used for pulling things in tight areas. My seal is now in. I pried the old seal out. Now I will put this ring back in place to hold that seal down. Afterwards, I will install cartridge. We're going back together. My cartridge is in. You can see that it is actually extended above the fork tube itself, because now we need to fill the tube. Refer to your manual for your exact level for oil. Mine measures that it needs to be 62 millimeters from the top. I need to set that up before I put the washer and the spring back in to the tube itself. And when I put the oil in, I'm going to want to plunge the dampener to make sure that that lower part of the spring or the fork is filled with oil, and then readjust my level. I have my fork oil. I'm going to seat my inner tube down to the bottom where it's seated. I wanted to say that. I want to move my fucking inner tube down to the bottom where you can feel it squish and seat. What we want to do, I know that I need to put about 21.4 ounces, 638 cc's in the Haynes manual, with a measurement of 62 millimeters from the top to this seated after it's been filled. I'm just going to fill it, because what I'm going to have to do is pump my dampening cartridge. Haynes manual says about 10 times until it gets really stiff, yeah, but keep going. You want to get all that air out. Then I'm going to actually measure it. You can measure it beforehand. You'll have to do it again. You're going to make something else messy. Do whatever you feel like. I'm going to do this for a while, and then we'll top off the fork, and we'll be done. So I've been slowly pouring more fork oil until I can get to about 2.44094 inches, which is 62 millimeters converted to inches. All I'm doing is basically gauging. If I'm at 2.5 and it's touching, I'm happy. So you put your spring back in. Tighter coil, bottom of the spring. That's the bottom. Put that down first. That's the bottom. Then you're going to put your washer, that other big washer, which is called a seat spacer. And then the spacer itself is this tube. After this, now that we've got everything set, we're going to have to compress this and put the fork cap back on, which is going to take a little bit of working. Make sure that your inner tube is seated fully, that your dampener is all the way out, and that your spacer is seated. Because what we're going to do is I'm going to start threading on the fork cap until I can touch that nut that holds it in place. Now I have a little bit of room. You may not have room if you replace your springs because of the spring retention rate that we talked about earlier. They are probably going to expand this a lot further, so you're not able to get any room between this spacer and the cap itself. So I may have an advantage with what I'm doing currently. I've got my 14 millimeter wrench, what I used to start this, and all I'm going to do is tighten it in between. Wrong way, dumbass. That's tight. I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to pull up on my tube, and I'm going to compress the fork cap. I want to go counterclockwise first because these threads are aluminum and they are small. Just a little bit, just enough. And then I should have had enough that I could do this, that I could let go and readjust. And now I can tighten down the cap as needed. Now I can tighten it, finish it. My fork is oily. I'm going to clean it as well. And the exterior, that is one fork tube done. The other one, that'll go twice as fast for you. Congratulations, you've done your fork seals for your ST1300. What I mentioned earlier is the marks that you made on your fork clamps and your tubes probably got cleaned off if you cleaned off the tubes. Pretty stupid.
Go ahead and measure those from the ledges if you needed to. You probably figured that out though. So I do a lot of wheelies on this bike. I'm gonna have to go through fork seals pretty often, I'm sure. So the more you do it, the better you are at it. Enjoy.